In most of my most recent videos, I've been sharing my views about everything from money to career, and I thought I wanted to talk a little bit about relationships. Um, Also, mental health, physical health, I talked about, and education, and why it's so bad and what we should do about it. So, anyway, here about relationships. You know, one of the oldest and I think least valid cliches is that blood is thicker than water, that we should prioritize family. Well, I tend to disagree. We are thrust into our family at random, and while we may share genetics and some environment, we all have, not we all, many people have family members who I guess are more trouble than they're worth. And I think it's wrong to necessarily buy the one-size-fits-all view that family first, blood thicker than water. There are some family members, that wayward cousin or whatever, who is just, a drain on you, and you're not going to help that much anyway, and your time is better spent. So I encourage normally people to prize their platonic and romantic friends. Those are people we've chosen ourselves. Speaking of friends, I'm not a very social person, and much of my personal relationships, apart from not my clients, my personal relationships, are I do co-counseling with people, one-on-one. I have 4 people with whom every 2 weeks we get together for half hour by phone, and the first 15 minutes that person shares their issue on which they would like my help. And in the next 15 minutes, I share the issue on which I would like some help. And these I've picked as to be people. These are people I've chosen. I've curated, if you will, or used discernment. I've been judgmental. These are very not just smart but wise and kind people of a variety of political perspectives. And I love that. And I also started something called the Board of Advisors, which is now probably in around 11th year. We meet once a month by teleconference, and similar kinds of people. And we meet for a total of an hour, precisely an hour. And I simply, after 2 minutes of small talk, and I'll give a couple of minutes of grace for people to be a bit late, I then say, okay, who'd like to take the floor? And they bring up some issue on which they'd like the group's input. The group asks questions, provides tactful input. They're wonderful people, good listeners, tactful suggestors, and it's worked very well. 7 people, so it's a very good size. The average 5 people attend each month. People are busy, but that's a very nice size for a group. It's big enough to have multiple input, not so big that nobody feels they have an active role. A bit about romantic relationships. I like the idea, we're not all rational, certainly, especially when it comes to romantic relationships, especially in the throes of infatuation. So I'm certainly not expecting people to be coldly rational about it, but to the extent to which they can and want to be. I like this report card, long-term relationship report card that I've come up with. It's also great for assessing, do you really want to marry this person? And that is, first of all, on the sex front, are you sexually compatible? Doesn't mean that they have a high sex drive or a low sex drive. It's that yours are similar and that your arc is similar. In the beginning of a relationship, usually sex is at its best in the first month or whatever. And in some relationships, it stays really excellent for a long time. Maybe declines somewhat, but stays. But sometimes it diverges, and one person is really hot to trot and the other is not. Well, one item on your romantic relationship report card is the arc of your sexual desire for each other roughly the same? 2, out of bed, do you enjoy talking with each other? Do you respect each other's opinion? Is the other person respectful of you but willing to disagree? That's really very important. As an offshoot of that is, do you feel good simply having that person in the same room with you? To be honest, that is a real strength of mine. I really like being even if my wife and I are doing parallel play where I'm reading and she's playing Scrabble on her iPad. We like being in the same room. That's a kind of an ineffable. Then there's things like, is the person reasonably self-supporting? If one partner is financially dependent on the others, it creates a power imbalance which leads to either resentment on the part of the income earner or a sense of great dependency on the part of the non-income earner. So being both parties contributing reasonably, not exactly the same, but contributing significantly to the income is important. Fatal flaw. Is there it is, while in the movies they show somebody who has a real severe disability and the other person is ever patient and everything, but it is very straining. Really ask yourself, does this person have a fatal flaw, violent temper, drug addictions, alcohol addiction, spendaholic, severe mental illness, whatever? Do you really want, is that something you want to have to deal with long term? What else do I want to say? I think that's about it. Similar values. Some people who are very religious need to be with other very religious people. Is one example. Somebody who's very materialistic would not be happy with a not materialistic person. There's a lot of fighting that goes on about money. And the final thing on the report card is this ineffable? Do you love the person? Does the person love you? Does the person kind of put you on a pedestal, not judge you as toughly, if that's a word, as in the real world out there, which can be very, very good at chewing people up and spitting them out or ignoring them. You want your long-term romantic partner to be someone who has this just positive overall feeling about you. It's some combination of respect, love, chemistry, etc. Anyway, so I believe that's really important. The marriage report card. Then there's I'm talking about relationships. So another, of course, critical relationship is should you have kids? It's the biggest sacrifice anybody ever makes. Some people say it's the best thing that they ever did, but many other people quietly, because nobody's willing to admit it unless they appear like a bad person, feel it was too great a sacrifice. You really are sacrificing not just 18 years of time and huge amounts of money, but very often, unfortunately, many adult children have to come back and live with their parents or choose to or continue to have problems, and the parents feel guilty and need to and choose to spend time trying to salvage that person who, quote, failed to launch. So really think hard about the kid thing. Realize that people don't tell you what it's really like. It's very easy for them to post on their Facebook the cute family pictures and to tell you how wonderful their kid is in school and everything else and how cute. But the reality is not quite as sanguine as that. Try to be as clear-eyed as you can. A word about parenting. One size does not fit all. Some kids really do best with very close supervision. Others, left to their own devices, if they're good kids, you don't want to hyper-manage them. You don't need to be a helicopter parent, denying them efficacy and denying them the freedom to be a child, which I think is very important for most kids, unless they're going to get into real big trouble. I'm glad that my parents didn't overschedule me and they didn't overprotect me. I won't go into details, I don't need to, but they were really quite letting me do whatever I wanted, and I didn't turn out too bad. And again, but it's going to vary with the kid. The only other thing I want to talk about is it's important to build intrinsic motivation. There's a tendency for some parents to use rewards and punishments too readily. That's external. That's just rewards and external rewards and punishments. Better to build the kid's intrinsic motivation to want to be good because it's intrinsically the right thing to do. So that if my kid was, let's say, stole money from my wallet, instead of saying I'm punishing you, I'm grounding you, etc., I would say, let's talk about this. Of course, I'm deeply disappointed. Tell me what really made you do it, and do you want to be that kind of person? And so there wouldn't be a reward it wouldn't be a punishment, but I would let the kid try to feel somewhat guilty about it inside themselves, so that they build in an intrinsic desire to behave well. That's especially true, when kids are, let's say, are sexually more active than the parent would like or are doing drugs. If the parent simply punishes, the parent isn't going to be around when the kid goes off to college or lives on their own, and then there's going to be a tendency to really rebel. But if my kid, for example, did drugs, and I am really quite anti-drug, having reviewed the literature on marijuana, for example, for Time and Psychology Today, I used to smoke a little marijuana myself, but It's the data, the real data, not the data that's promulgated by the advocates, but by solid university research, makes me more scared than I otherwise would have been. So if my kid was smoking dope, I would probably, again, I would not punish. I would sit down with them and I would tell them about why I was worried and ask them. I said, do you want to take that risk? I know other kids are doing it. And then I would listen a lot, and I would hug the kid, and I'd say, I'd love you anyway, no matter what, but I'm worried. So that builds the intrinsic motivation. When the kid's away or off at college or whatever, the kid is more likely to, not do drugs or do it less, I believe. What else? Hyperscheduling. I really like the idea of, well, I kind of talked about this a bit earlier, but my happiest moments as a child really were doing things like staring out the window, watching the cars go by, lying on the grass, looking up at the clouds, reading on my own, listening to music on my own. It's because I guess my parents knew I wasn't going to be a bad boy. I was a pretty reasonable guy. But don't overschedule your kid. Your kid's entitled to breathe a bit. That's not to say you don't expose. One thing I do want to say is about piano and music. As a professional pianist and knowing a lot of others, most people want to be able to play music so they can just sit down at the piano and by ear play whatever. 98% of kids can't do that, and they just sit struggling mechanically, trying to translate those squiggles on a page to their fingers. It's laborious. It's horrible. And very passive. Unless your kid seems to have the gift of being able to pick something out by ear and playing, I would encourage you to not push that. Not push any one thing that isn't who they are naturally. If your kid's not an athlete, don't say they need to be an athlete to be well-rounded, they need to be a musician. Build on the kid's strengths. If he's a reader, let him do a lot of reading. If the kid is very social, let him encourage him to invite kids over to the house and create clubs. And I was rereading again Huckleberry Finn and how the kids created a gang. They were going to do all these robberies. They didn't really do any robberies, but it was fun to plot them. So one size does not fit all. Now, a word about divorcing. As you know, half of couples divorce. And a lot of those who stay together are staying together for the kids or because they're afraid of the nightmare that often divorce is and expensive. Do avoid lawyering up. Even they have these now lawyers who try to call themselves mediators, and they are, but most lawyers have a lawyer, argumentative, oppositional, competitive worldview. I think the best mediators, and I'm not a big fan of shrinks at all, but I think the best mediators are probably people who are psychologists or counselors, that type. So I would recommend that as a way of avoiding the lawyers and the incredibly painful and expensive process that going the legal route to divorce can cause. And finally, a word about aging parents. My parents are now dead, but I feel good about how I reacted. I am very fortunate to have a wonderfully busy work life and personal life. And when my mother, in her last couple of years, she was declining. My dad died suddenly of a stroke, so there was no issue there at 86. But my mother, when she was in her late 80s, had declined mentally, not physically. And she lives in New York. I live in California. And I know I've had a number of clients who stopped doing whatever they were doing and went to take care of their mother or their father in their last years. I felt that wasn't going to be net worth it. Yes, I benefited by not doing that. But it seems too big a sacrifice. So what I did is I did make the one-time effort to get the best damn home care I could get for my mom. She wanted to live her last years at home, and I honored that. And I really found great, wonderful, God bless her, Olga, took care of my mom for the full 2 years. I paid her very well. But more importantly, I talked with her every day, as well as my mom every day, and really showed my appreciation and bought little presents and made her feel like a very valuable member of our family. And she did live with my mom the whole last year, I think, maybe 2, I don't remember, but for a significant chunk of time at the end. So I encourage you to think 3 times before stopping your life to take care of an elderly parent. Just do it with quality time, not quantity time, as far as I'm concerned. In any event, those are my various thoughts about relationships with family members, like that wayward cousin, whether you really should think blood is thicker than water, in terms of my valuing and very carefully curating my friends and using them to be of mutual benefit, but with the structures that I mentioned, the co-counseling, each counseling each other for 15 minutes every couple of weeks, and the board of advisors where 7 of us meet monthly by teleconference also and give each other counsel. That report card I mentioned about a good way to evaluate a relationship to the extent you can be rational. The enormous sacrifice of having kids and the importance of not being a one-size-fits-all parent. The importance in divorce of every situation is different, but of trying to avoid lawyering up and using a more psychologist or counselor-oriented mediator if at all possible. And then regarding aging parents, try to not stop your life, but take the quality time to make sure your aging parent gets the care they need. And as I did speak to my mom, as I mentioned, every day. I used to talk to her, sing to her the things she liked, play the piano for her. So I did it her way without stopping my life. Anyway, those are my thoughts on relationships. I welcome your thumbs up and accept your thumbs down. I always look forward to your comments, and especially like it if you hit the share button below. Share on your social media so that my efforts can have broader impact. And I am flattered if you choose to subscribe to my channel. In any event, I do thank you for watching. By the way, I should mention, some of these ideas are embedded in my new book, Jeremy's Quests, available on Amazon, Jeremy's Quests. It's a thin book, written very simply, very practical, and beautifully illustrated by Siddhartha Malik, a wonderful illustrator, watercolor illustrator in India. Anyway, thanks again for watching. I'm Marty Nemko.